The morning sun cast long shadows across the remote research station on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. Mira stood at the giant telescope, her eyes focused on the data streaming across multiple screens. She had been tracking unusual energy readings from deep space for weeks now, and today the signals were stronger than ever. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she tried to decode the mysterious patterns that seemed almost too organized to be natural phenomena. "Still working on those strange signals?" Hannah asked as she entered the observation room. She carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her friend. Hannah had taken a break from her security consulting work to visit Mira at the isolated facility. The former Special Forces soldier found the quiet research station a welcome change from the dangerous assignments that usually filled her days. "These aren't random space noises," Mira replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. "The mathematical sequences are too complex and too regular. It's like someone is trying to communicate, but the source is so far away that the signal takes months to reach us." She pointed to the screen where waves of data continued to scroll past. "Look at this pattern here. It repeats every 47 minutes and 32 seconds, exactly." Yuna joined them at the observation deck, having just finished a video call with her diplomatic team back in Seoul. As a conflict resolution specialist, she had been invited to the station to help mediate a dispute between different research groups who wanted to use the facility's equipment. "Maybe it's just a pulsar or some other natural phenomenon," she suggested, though her tone showed she was genuinely curious about her friend's discovery. "Pulsars don't send mathematical equations," Mira said firmly. "This is different. This is intelligent." She pulled up another screen showing the decoded portions of the signal. "See these numbers? They follow prime number sequences, then shift to Fibonacci patterns, then back to primes. No natural object in space does that." The 3 women had been friends since university, though their careers had taken them in very different directions. Mira had become one of Earth's leading astrophysicists, specializing in deep space communication and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Hannah had served with distinction in special forces before starting her own private security company. Yuna had built a reputation as one of the world's most skilled diplomatic negotiators, someone who could find peaceful solutions to conflicts that others thought impossible to resolve. They had all come to this remote station for different reasons, but the isolation and beauty of the location had given them a rare chance to spend time together away from their demanding careers. Their husbands were attending a technology conference in Tokyo, leaving the 3 friends to enjoy a peaceful week of scientific research and catching up on old times. "The energy readings are getting stronger," Mira noted, frowning at her instruments. "Much stronger than they should be if the source is still at the same distance. It's almost like—" She stopped mid-sentence as all the screens in the room suddenly went white with static. Outside, the sky began to change color. What had been a clear blue morning suddenly took on an odd greenish tint, as if the atmosphere itself was being affected by some unseen force. Birds stopped singing, and the usual sound of waves against the rocky coastline seemed muted and distant. "That's not normal," Hannah said, her military training immediately putting her on alert. She moved to the window and scanned the horizon. "Mira, are your instruments picking up anything else? Radiation? Electromagnetic interference?" Before Mira could answer, a sound unlike anything they had ever heard filled the air. It was deep and resonant, like the call of some massive creature, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once rather than any specific direction. The building itself began to vibrate, and coffee cups rattled on tables throughout the facility. "We need to get out of here," Yuna said, her diplomatic instincts telling her that whatever was happening was beyond normal human experience. "This feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong." The 3 women moved quickly through the research station, but as they reached the main corridor, the building's lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a red glow that made the familiar hallways look alien and threatening. Through the windows, they could see that the greenish color in the sky had intensified. And now, there were shapes, moving within the strange light. The shapes were enormous, blocking out portions of the sky like clouds, but they moved with purpose and intelligence rather than drifting with the wind. "Ships," Hana whispered, her voice tight with tension. Those are ships. The vessels that descended from the green-tinged sky were unlike anything in human design. They were smooth and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. The largest was the size of a city, while smaller craft swarmed around, like insects around a hive. As they descended, beams of blue light began scanning the landscape below. The signals, Mira said suddenly. They weren't trying to communicate with us. They were scanning us, learning about us. Those mathematical patterns were them analyzing our technology, our communications, maybe even our biology. One of the scanning beams swept across the research station, and immediately the three women felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the light was examining them at a cellular level. The beam lingered on them for several seconds before moving on to scan other parts of the facility. We're being cataloged, Yuna realized, like specimens in a collection. The smaller ships began landing around the research station, their smooth hulls reflecting the strange green light that still filled the sky. Doors opened in their sides without any visible hinges or mechanisms, and figures began emerging. The aliens were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and smooth gray skin. Their faces were almost human in basic structure, but their eyes were larger and completely black, and they had no visible ears or nose. They moved with fluid grace, as if gravity affected them differently than it did humans. Stay together, Hana instructed, falling automatically into her protective role. Don't make any sudden movements, but be ready to run if I give the signal. The aliens entered the research station through multiple entrances simultaneously, their movements coordinated with military precision. They carried devices that looked like a cross between a scanner and a weapon, and they swept these instruments over everything they encountered, from equipment to furniture to the walls themselves. When they found the three women, the aliens stopped and seemed to communicate with each other, though no sound was audible. Their black eyes fixed on the humans with what might have been curiosity, or might have been something else entirely. One of the aliens approached and pointed its device at Mira. The instrument emitted a soft humming sound, and a pale blue light enveloped her. She felt the same tingling sensation as before, but stronger, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that the device was recording not just her physical appearance, but something deeper about her identity and capabilities. The same process was repeated, with Hana and Yuna. Each woman tried to remain calm, but they all felt violated by the intimate nature of whatever scanning was being performed. It was as if the aliens were not just looking at them, but looking through them. After the scanning was complete, the aliens gestured for the women to follow them. When Hana hesitated, one of the creatures raised its device, and the air around them shimmered with energy. The message was clear without any words being spoken. As they were escorted toward one of the landed ships, Mira caught sight of other research station personnel being led away by different groups of aliens. Everyone was being taken, but they were being separated and loaded onto different vessels. The aliens were being systematic and thorough in their collection of human specimens. The interior of the alien ship was as smooth and organic as its exterior. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, and there were no visible controls or instruments anywhere. The three women were placed in a chamber that was comfortable but clearly designed to prevent escape. The walls were too smooth to climb, and the door sealed itself without leaving any trace of where it had been. "Where do you think they're taking us?" Yuna asked, though she suspected none of them would like the answer. "Somewhere far from here," Mira replied, feeling the subtle vibration that indicated their ship was lifting off. "Those signals I was tracking came from deep space. If that's where these ships came from, then we're about to take a very long journey." As their vessel rose into the strange green sky and joined the larger fleet, the three women pressed themselves against the small window in their chamber and watched Earth grow smaller below them. They had no way of knowing that their capture was about to set in motion events that would change the balance of power in the entire galaxy, or that the aliens, who had taken them, had made the most dangerous mistake in their species' history. The technology conference in Tokyo had been running for 3 days when Tai first noticed something was wrong. He was sitting in a presentation about quantum computing applications when his secure communication device vibrated against his wrist. The device was specially designed to receive only the most urgent messages, and it had not activated once in the past 2 years. The message was brief but terrifying. Research Station 7 has gone dark. All personnel missing. No distress signal. Investigating. It was signed with the code that identified Earth's most classified monitoring system. Ty excused himself from the conference room and walked quickly to a quiet corner of the building. His fingers moved rapidly across the device's hidden interface as he accessed information that officially did not exist. Research Station 7 was where Mira was conducting her deep space research. The monitoring system showed that all communications from the facility had stopped exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes ago. He immediately sent a coded message to Jin and Wu, who were attending different sessions of the same conference. The message contained only 3 words, but those words would set in motion the most dangerous rescue operation in human history. Our wives. Gone. Jin received the message while pretending to listen to a lecture about artificial intelligence development. To anyone watching, he appeared to be a normal technology consultant taking notes on his tablet. In reality, he was accessing a network of information sources that spanned the entire globe and reached into space itself. Within minutes, he had confirmation of what Tay had discovered. The research station was not just silent, it had been completely evacuated. Satellite imagery showed no signs of explosion or natural disaster. The buildings were intact, the equipment was undisturbed, but every human being who had been there was simply gone. More disturbing were the atmospheric readings from the time the station went dark. Electromagnetic interference consistent with advanced technology had been detected over the area. The energy signatures did not match any known human or natural phenomena. Something had come from outside Earth's atmosphere and taken everyone from the research station. Wu was in a meeting with several international technology ministers when his device signaled an incoming priority message. He read Tay's words and felt his blood turn cold. His wife Yuna had been at that research station with Mira and Hana. Without showing any change in expression, he continued his conversation about international cooperation in space technology while his mind began calculating the resources he would need to find and retrieve his wife. The 3 men met in Ty's hotel room 30 minutes later. To anyone who might be watching, they appeared to be 3 successful Korean businessmen having a casual conversation. The reality was very different. "Tell me you have something," Tay said as soon as the door closed behind them. His calm exterior hid the fact that he was one of the most dangerous military commanders on Earth, a man who had spent the last decade building humanity's secret defenses against threats that the general population could not even imagine. "It was extraterrestrial," Jin confirmed, pulling up holographic displays from devices that were decades ahead of publicly available technology. The energy signatures matched theoretical models for faster-than-light propulsion. Whatever took them came from deep space and left the same way. You studied the data with the analytical mind that had made him Earth's most feared negotiator. This wasn't random. Look at the precision of the operation. They targeted the research station specifically, took everyone without causing any structural damage, and left no trace of their identity or destination. Someone wanted human specimens, and they knew exactly where to find them. Tay activated a communication system that was hidden within what appeared to be an ordinary laptop computer. "Shadow Command, this is Zeus. Priority Alpha authorization. I need a full deployment, stealth configuration." The voice that responded was crisp and professional. "Confirmed, Zeus. Shadow Fleet is standing by. What are your orders?" "My wife has been taken by extraterrestrial forces. I want every ship we have scanning this system for any trace of where they went. I want our best analysts working on the energy signatures. And I want our long-range scouts prepared for immediate deep space deployment." Jin was simultaneously accessing his own network of resources. His fingers moved across multiple interfaces as he contacted agents and informants that existed in the shadows of human society and beyond. "I'm activating the Terran Intelligence Network. If there are any alien civilizations that have been in contact with Earth, my people will find them. If there have been any other abductions we don't know about, we'll know within the hour." "What about diplomatic channels?" Wu asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "There are no diplomatic channels for species that conduct Unprovoked kidnapping operations, Tay replied grimly. But once we find them, you'll have your chance to negotiate, after I've made it clear what the consequences are for taking our people. The three men had been friends since their university days, long before their careers had taken them into the most classified levels of human activity. What the world did not know was that Earth had been preparing for extraterrestrial contact for much longer than anyone suspected. The preparations had not been made by governments or public institutions, but by a small group of individuals who had recognized the need for humanity to be ready for threats from beyond their world. Tay commanded the Shadow Fleet, a collection of spacecraft that used technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels and developed in secret facilities around the solar system. The ships were invisible to conventional detection methods and capable of speeds that would allow them to reach other star systems within weeks rather than centuries. Jin controlled the Terran Intelligence Network, an organization that officially did not exist but had agents and informants throughout human society and beyond. His people had been monitoring alien activity around Earth for years, gathering information about species that might pose a threat to human civilization. Wu was known publicly as a diplomatic consultant, but his real role was as Earth's primary negotiator with alien species. He had been involved in a dozen first-contact situations that the public had never heard about, establishing trade agreements and non-aggression pacts with civilizations that preferred to remain hidden from human awareness. "I'm getting reports," Jin said, studying the data streaming across his displays. 3 other research facilities have reported unusual electromagnetic disturbances in the past week. All of them were conducting deep space research similar to what Mira was working on. We may be dealing with a systematic intelligence gathering operation. Ty's expression darkened. They've been watching us, learning about our capabilities. The research stations were targeted because they represented our most advanced understanding of space communication and detection, which means they know more about us than we know about them, Wu added. That gives them a significant advantage in any negotiation. Not for long, Jin said. I'm activating sleeper agents in 17 different star systems. If our people are being held anywhere within 50 light-years of Earth, we'll find them. Tay was already issuing orders to his fleet commanders. I want stealth reconnaissance ships deployed to every system we've identified as potentially habitable. Full sensor sweeps, but maintain invisibility protocols. If you detect any alien activity, observe and report, but do not engage without direct authorization. The 3 men worked through the night, coordinating resources that the rest of humanity did not even know existed. By dawn, they had deployed the most sophisticated search and rescue operation in human history. Dozens of invisible spacecraft were spreading out across local space, while hundreds of agents and informants were gathering intelligence about alien civilizations that might be responsible for the abductions. I'm getting something, Jin announced, as the first reports began coming in from his network. There's a species called the Galactic Empire that's been operating in this region for thousands of years. They're known for collecting specimens from primitive worlds for entertainment and study purposes. Primitive worlds, Tay repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. They think we're primitive. According to my sources, they're led by someone called the Galactic King. He has a personal collection of exotic life forms from across the galaxy. Apparently, he considers it a mark of status to own representatives of newly discovered species. Wu's expression was calm, but his friends recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same expression he wore when entering negotiations, where the other party had already made a fatal mistake. Then we need to educate them about exactly how primitive humanity really is. I've got a location, Jin continued. The Galactic Empire operates out of a massive ship that serves as both a palace and a mobile capital. According to my information, it's currently located in a system about 30 light-years from here. Tay was already calculating travel times and deployment strategies. The Shadow Fleet can reach that system in 18 days if we push our fastest ships to maximum speed. But we'll need more than just a rescue operation. If this Galactic King thinks he can take human beings for his collection, we need to make sure he understands the consequences of that decision. The massive alien ship that held them prisoner was unlike anything the 3 women had ever imagined. The corridors were wide enough for vehicles to pass through, and the ceilings disappeared into darkness high above their heads. Everything was built on a scale that made humans feel like insects in a cathedral designed for giants. Mira had been studying the walls of their prison for hours. What had first appeared to be smooth, featureless surfaces were actually covered with microscopic patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. She pressed her ear against the wall and could hear a faint humming sound, like electricity flowing through circuits. But the patterns were too organic to be simple technology. "It's biological," she told Hana and Yuna. "This entire ship is grown, not built. The walls are alive, which means they're connected to some kind of central nervous system. If I can figure out how that system works, I might be able to access their computer networks." Hana had been conducting her own investigation of their prison. She had mapped every surface, tested every possible weakness, and analyzed the behavior patterns of their guards. "The aliens check on us every 4 hours and 23 minutes, she reported. "Always the same routine. 2 guards, one stays by the door while the other scans us with that device. They never vary the timing or the procedure." "That's a weakness," Yuna observed. "Rigid routines always are. In diplomatic negotiations, the side that can't adapt to changing circumstances is the side that loses." The 3 women had been imprisoned for 6 days now, and they had used that time to learn everything they could about their situation. They had discovered that they were not the only human captives aboard the ship. Through careful listening and observation, they had identified at least 12 other humans being held in similar cells throughout their section of the vessel. More importantly, they had begun to understand their captors. The aliens that had taken them were not the rulers of this ship. They were servants, possibly even slaves themselves, carrying out the orders of someone they had not yet seen. The real power aboard this vessel lay elsewhere, and the 3 women were determined to find out who was responsible for their capture. "I've been watching the guards' behavior," Yuna said. "They're afraid of something. When they look at us, there's curiosity, but when they look down the corridor toward the center of the ship, there's fear. Whatever they're afraid of is in that direction." Mira had made progress in understanding the ship's biological computer systems. By pressing her hands against certain patterns in the walls and focusing her thoughts, she had discovered that she could access basic information about the ship's layout and functions. The process was exhausting and gave her terrible headaches, but she was beginning to map the vessel's structure and identify critical systems. "This ship is massive," she reported. "It's not just a prison or a transport. It's like a floating city. There are thousands of different species being held here, not just humans. And at the center of it all is something they call the Royal Collection. A zoo," Hana said grimly. "We're exhibits in someone's private zoo." The breakthrough came on their 7th day of imprisonment. Mira had been experimenting with the ship's biological interfaces when she accidentally accessed what appeared to be a communication system. Suddenly, her mind was filled with voices speaking in dozens of different alien languages, but somehow she could understand them all. The voices belonged to other prisoners throughout the ship. The biological computer system that ran the vessel also served as a communication network for the thousands of captives being held aboard it. Most of the conversations were expressions of despair or resignation, but some carried information about escape attempts and resistance activities. "There's an organized resistance movement," Mira told her friends excitedly. "Prisoners from dozens of different species have been working together to gather intelligence and plan escape attempts. They've been waiting for someone with the technical knowledge to hack into the ship's systems." "What do they need us to do?" Hana asked, immediately ready for action. Through the communication network, Mira made contact with the resistance leaders. They were a diverse group representing species from across the galaxy, but they all shared one thing in common. They had been captured by the same alien empire and added to the collection of the being they called the Galactic King. The resistance had been planning for months, but they had been missing crucial pieces of information about the ship's security, systems, and the location of key control centers. Mira's ability to interface with the biological computers had given them access to data they had never been able to obtain before. "The ship has a central control chamber where all the major systems can be accessed," Mira explained to Hana and Yuna. "If we can reach that chamber and disable the security systems, We can free every prisoner on the ship simultaneously. How many prisoners are we talking about? Yuna asked. Over 8,000, representing more than 200 different species from across the galaxy. Hana whistled softly. That's not a rescue operation, that's a revolution. The plan that emerged from their discussions with the Resistance was ambitious and dangerous. They would coordinate a ship-wide uprising with different groups of prisoners targeting specific objectives simultaneously. Mira would lead a team to the central control chamber to disable security and open all the prison cells. Hana would organize tactical teams to secure key areas and neutralize guard posts. Yuna would coordinate communication between different species and groups to ensure everyone understood their role in the operation. There's something else, Mira said as she gathered more information through the ship's communication system. The Galactic King is planning to display his newest acquisitions to other alien rulers in 3 days. That includes us and all the other humans they've captured. It's going to be some kind of ceremonial event. Perfect, Hana said with a cold smile. Nothing disrupts a ceremony quite like 8,000 angry prisoners breaking out of their cages. The 3 women spent the next 2 days preparing for the uprising. Mira worked with alien scientists and engineers to map every critical system on the ship. Hana coordinated with military personnel from various species to plan tactical operations. Yuna established communication protocols that would allow hundreds of different species to work together despite language barriers. The biological computer system that Mira had learned to access turned out to be the key to everything. Through it, she could monitor the movements of guards throughout the ship, track the locations of weapons and equipment, and even influence some of the ship's basic functions. The aliens who had built the vessel had never imagined that their prisoners might learn to use their own technology against them. I can open cell doors throughout the ship simultaneously, Mira reported. But once I do that, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before their security systems adapt and lock everything down again. We need to accomplish everything in that 10-minute window. 10 minutes to free 8,000 prisoners and take control of a ship the size of a city, Hana mused. I've had easier assignments, but not many more important ones. The day of the ceremony arrived. Through the ship's communication system, the 3 women could sense the tension building among the Resistance members throughout the vessel. Everyone knew that this would be their only chance. If the uprising failed, the consequences would be severe for all involved. Mira positioned herself at the biological interface in their cell, her hands pressed against the pulsing patterns in the wall. Hana stood ready by the door, having fashioned weapons from pieces of their cell's furniture. Yuna was in mental contact with Resistance leaders throughout the ship, ready to coordinate the simultaneous actions of hundreds of different groups. Guards are moving toward the ceremonial chamber, Mira reported. Most of their security forces are being redeployed to protect the Galactic King and his guests. This is as good as it's going to get. All teams report ready, Yuna added, her mind filled with confirmation signals from across the ship. Then let's show this Galactic King what happens when you put humans in cages, Hana said. Mira pressed her consciousness deep into the ship's biological computer system, feeling the alien technology respond to her thoughts. She found the security controls and began the process of opening every prison cell simultaneously. Throughout the massive vessel, thousands of cell doors began to slide open. At the same time, Hana kicked open their own door, which Mira had unlocked, remotely. The 2 alien guards outside were so surprised by the sudden breach that they had no time to react before Hana was among them. Her special forces training served her well as she disarmed both guards and secured their weapons. Go, she told Mira and Yuna. I'll secure this section. You 2 get to that control chamber and make sure this works. Throughout the ship, similar scenes were playing out as thousands of prisoners emerged from their cells to find their captors, completely unprepared for a coordinated uprising. The aliens had never experienced anything like this before. In their thousands of years of collecting specimens from primitive worlds, they had never encountered species capable of organizing such a sophisticated resistance movement. Mira and Yuna ran through corridors filled with freed prisoners from dozens of different worlds. The Galactic King's throne room was filled with representatives from across his empire when the first reports of the uprising reached him. Vexitar had been enjoying the admiration of his fellow rulers as he prepared to unveil his latest acquisitions. The humans were to be the centerpiece of his collection, examples of a newly discovered species that showed remarkable intelligence despite their primitive technology. "Your Majesty," one of his advisors interrupted, approaching the throne with obvious reluctance. "We are receiving reports of disturbances in the detention levels." Vexitar did not even look up from his conversation with the Empress of the Rigel Confederation. "Deal with it. I do not wish to be disturbed during the ceremony." But the disturbances could not be dealt with so easily. Throughout the massive ship, thousands of prisoners were fighting their way through corridors that had never seen violence before. The guards, who had grown lazy after centuries of dealing with demoralized and isolated captives, found themselves facing coordinated teams of warriors from dozens of different species. In the control chamber at the heart of the ship, Mira was discovering that her connection to the biological computer system gave her access to far more than she had initially realized. The living technology that ran the vessel was designed to respond to the thoughts and intentions of its users, and Mira's human mind was adapting to its alien logic with frightening speed. "I can see everything," she told Yuna, as her consciousness spread through the ship's systems. "Every corridor, every room, every weapon, and I can control most of it." Through her link to the ship's network, Mira began systematically disabling security systems throughout the vessel. Doors that had been locked for centuries suddenly opened. Weapons that had been stored in secure armories became accessible to the freed prisoners. Most importantly, the communication jamming that had prevented the various species from coordinating with each other was lifted for the first time in decades. Yuna was coordinating with resistance leaders throughout the ship, but her diplomatic training told her that they needed more than just a successful prison break. "We need to send a message," she told Mira, "not just to the crew of this ship, but to the entire Galactic Empire. They need to understand that humans are not primitives, to be collected." Meanwhile, in the detention levels, Hana was discovering just how many species the Galactic Empire had been collecting over the centuries. She found herself fighting alongside warriors who had been captured from dozens of different worlds, each bringing their own unique combat techniques and technologies to the battle. "The humans are leading this," she heard one alien warrior say to another in a language she somehow understood through the ship's translation system. "They organized this entire operation in just 7 days. What kind of species can do that?" The answer was becoming apparent throughout the ship as the uprising continued to gain momentum. Humans had a talent for adaptation and organization that none of the other species had displayed during their time in captivity. Mira's ability to interface with alien technology, Hana's tactical expertise, and Yuna's gift for bringing different groups together were turning what should have been a chaotic prison riot into a sophisticated military operation. But the real shock was still to come. As the battle raged inside the ship, sensors throughout the Galactic Empire began detecting something that should have been impossible. Dozens of vessels were approaching from the direction of the primitive world where the humans had been captured, and these ships were using technology that the Empire's scientists could not identify or explain. The Shadow Fleet had arrived. Tai stood on the bridge of his flagship as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system where the Galactic King's ship was located. Around him, 47 of humanity's most advanced warships shimmered into visibility as their stealth systems deactivated. "Target confirmed," his tactical officer reported. "Massive vessel, approximately 800 kilometers in length. Energy signatures consistent with the technology that attacked Earth." "Any sign of our people?" Tai asked, detecting massive internal energy discharges throughout the target vessel. "It appears to be experiencing some kind of internal conflict." Tai smiled grimly. He knew his wife well enough to recognize her handiwork. "Signal the fleet. Surround the target, but do not engage until I give the order. If our people are fighting their way out, we don't want to interfere with their operation." At the same time, Jin's network of agents throughout the galaxy was activated simultaneously. On dozens of worlds, carefully placed operatives began executing missions that had been planned for years, but never implemented. Government officials, who had been secretly working with the Galactic Empire, found their communications intercepted and their crimes exposed. Military installations that supported the Empire's collection operations were sabotaged. Most importantly, species that had been conquered by the Empire decades or centuries ago suddenly received detailed intelligence about the Empire's weaknesses and guidance on how to exploit them. Phase 1 complete, Jin reported from his command ship. Every major Empire installation within 50 light-years is either destroyed or under attack by local resistance movements. Their communication networks are compromised, and their military forces are scattered across dozens of different systems trying to deal with simultaneous uprisings. The third phase of humanity's response was the most subtle, but potentially the most devastating. Wu had spent the journey to the Galactic King's location in communication with alien leaders throughout the region, calling in favors and agreements that had been negotiated in secret over the past decade. The Rigel Confederation has agreed to withdraw all support for the Empire, he reported. The Centauri Alliance is demanding an immediate investigation into the Empire's collection practices. 6 other major powers have issued formal condemnations and are threatening military action if human captives are not released immediately. Inside the Galactic King's ship, the uprising was reaching its climax. Mira had gained complete control of the vessel's biological computer systems and was using them to coordinate the actions of thousands of freed prisoners. Doors opened and closed at her command, weapon systems turned against their former operators, and even the ship's life support could be adjusted to favor the prisoners over their guards. "I'm reading human ships outside," she announced through the communication network. 47 vessels, all using stealth technology that's more advanced than anything this Empire has. Vextar finally understood the magnitude of his mistake when his chief advisor burst into the throne room without ceremony. "Your Majesty, we are under attack from multiple directions. The detention levels have been completely overrun. Our external communications are being jammed, and there are unknown ships surrounding us demanding our immediate surrender." "Unknown ships?" Vextar demanded. "From which system?" "That's the problem, Your Majesty. They claim to be from Earth, the primitive world where we collected the humans." For the first time in his long reign, the Galactic King felt something he had almost forgotten: fear. The species he had dismissed as primitive had not only organized a successful uprising among his prisoners, but had somehow crossed interstellar space to confront him directly. "Open communication channels," he ordered. "I will speak to whoever is commanding these vessels." The face that appeared on the main screen was human, but there was nothing primitive about the intelligence in his eyes or the technology visible behind him. Tay looked directly at the alien ruler who had dared to take his wife, and his expression was cold enough to freeze hydrogen. "I am Supreme Commander Tay of the Earth Defense Forces," he said in a voice that carried the weight of absolute authority. "You are holding human citizens against their will. You will release them immediately and surrender yourself for judgment, or I will take actions that will result in the complete destruction of your ship and everything in it." Vextar tried to maintain his composure, but he was beginning to realize that he was dealing with a species far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "You are in violation of Galactic Empire territory," he replied. "Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "No," Tay said simply. "You will face the consequences. You took our people. Now we're here to collect them. The only question is whether we do this the easy way or the hard way." To emphasize his point, the human fleet began demonstrating capabilities that the Galactic Empire had never seen before. Ships that had been invisible suddenly appeared throughout the system. Weapons that fired beams of pure energy began systematically destroying Empire installations on nearby planets. Most unsettling of all, several ships began displaying technology that seemed to manipulate space and time itself, making them effectively impossible to target or track. "What do you want?" Vextar asked, his royal composure finally cracking. "I want my wife back," Tay replied. "And I want every other human you've taken. And then I want you to understand that Earth is not a primitive world that you can raid for specimens. We are a species that protects its own, and we have been preparing for this moment far longer than you realize." Inside the ship, the last pockets of resistance were being overwhelmed by the coordinated efforts of the freed prisoners. The Galactic King's ship had become a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of freed prisoners from hundreds of worlds were fighting alongside 3 human women who had turned from captives into leaders of the largest prison uprising in galactic history. Outside, 47 human warships waited with weapons that could destroy entire planets, but their commanders showed remarkable restraint as they allowed their people to fight their own battle from within. Vextar sat on his throne surrounded by the few guards who had not fled or surrendered, watching his empire crumble in real time through reports flooding in from across the galaxy. The humans had not just come to rescue their people, they had come to wage war on an entire civilization, and they were winning. "Your Majesty," his chief advisor said, his voice shaking with fear. "The humans are requesting permission to board. They say they want to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Vextar laughed bitterly. "What is there to negotiate? They have already won." The docking bay doors opened to admit a shuttle from the human fleet. 3 men stepped out, and even though they wore no uniforms or insignia of rank, everyone who saw them immediately understood that these were the leaders of humanity's military forces. They moved with the confidence of people who had never known defeat, and the calm assurance of those who held absolute power over life and death. Tay, Jin, and Wu walked through corridors filled with freed prisoners who stepped aside respectfully as they passed. The aliens who had once been captives now looked at humans with a mixture of awe and gratitude. In the space of a few hours, 3 human women had accomplished what centuries of resistance movements had failed to achieve. They found their wives in the central control chamber, where Mira was still connected to the ship's biological computer systems. Her consciousness was spread throughout the massive vessel, monitoring and controlling systems that the Galactic Empire's own engineers barely understood. Hana was coordinating security teams made up of warriors from dozens of different species, all of whom had accepted her leadership without question. Yuna was in communication with alien governments throughout the galaxy, negotiating the terms of what would become known as the Galactic Liberation. "You're late," Mira said with a tired smile as her husband entered the control chamber. "We already have everything under control here." Tay looked around at the impossible scene of his wife, commanding alien technology while coordinating a multi-species military operation. "I can see that, but we brought backup, just in case." The reunion was brief but intense. Each couple embraced quickly before returning to the work that still needed to be done. The battle for the ship was over, but the war for the galaxy was just beginning. "What's our situation?" Jin asked, immediately focusing on the intelligence gathering that was his specialty. "Better than we hoped," Hana replied. "The Empire's military forces are scattered across dozens of systems, and most of their subject species are already in open revolt. The information Mira pulled from their computer systems shows that their entire power structure was built on the assumption that no one would ever challenge them simultaneously on multiple fronts. They never encountered a species like us before," Yuna added. "Most civilizations develop along predictable patterns. They become advanced in either technology or organization, but rarely both at the same time. Humans are unusual because we've mastered both." Wu studied the political intelligence that was streaming in from across the galaxy. 17 major alien governments have formally withdrawn their recognition of the Empire's authority. 23 others are demanding immediate investigations into the collection practices. The Empire's political structure is collapsing as fast as their military, and their economy is in complete chaos, Jin reported. "My agents have been systematically disrupting their trade networks and communication systems. Species that have been paying tribute to the Empire for centuries are suddenly asking why they need to continue supporting a government that can't even control its own prison ships." But the real revelation came when Mira shared the information she had discovered in the deepest levels of the ship's computer systems. The Galactic Empire was not an ancient and powerful civilization. It was a relatively recent creation, built on the ruins of older and more advanced societies that had been systematically destroyed or absorbed over the past few thousand years. "They're not explorers or conquerors," she explained. "They're parasites. They find civilizations that are technologically advanced but politically fragmented. Then they use superior organization and ruthless tactics to take control. Once they control a species, they use that species' technology and resources to attack the next target. which explains why their technology is so inconsistent, Tay observed. This ship uses biological computers, but their weapons are based on energy manipulation, and their faster-than-light drives use completely different principles. They didn't develop any of it themselves. Exactly, Mira confirmed, and it means they have a fatal weakness. They don't really understand how their own technology works, they just use what they've stolen from other species. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The Galactic Empire that had terrorized dozens of star systems was built on stolen technology and maintained through fear rather than genuine strength. More importantly, it meant that the species they had conquered still possessed the knowledge needed to rebuild their own civilizations once the Empire's control was broken. We need to get Vextar to surrender publicly, Wu said. If the other species see their supposedly all-powerful ruler surrendering to humans, it will break the psychological hold the Empire has over them. The confrontation in the throne room was unlike any diplomatic encounter in galactic history. The Galactic King, who had ruled over hundreds of worlds and billions of beings, found himself facing 6 humans who had systematically dismantled his empire in the space of a few days. "You want me to surrender?" Vextar said, his voice carrying centuries of arrogance even in defeat. "To primitives from a world we discovered just weeks ago." "You're not surrendering to primitives," Tay replied, calmly. "You're surrendering to the species that just proved your empire was an illusion. We took your most secure facility, turned your own prisoners against you, destroyed your military installations across dozens of systems, and convinced your allies to abandon you, all in less than a week." "What do you want?" the fallen king asked. Wu stepped forward, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute authority. "We want every human returned to Earth immediately. We want every other species you've conquered given the choice of independence or alliance with Earth. We want your collection of stolen technologies shared with the species you stole them from. And we want the galaxy to understand that humanity is now the dominant power in this region of space." "And if I refuse?" Jin answered with a smile that contained no warmth at all. "Then we demonstrate what happens to species that threaten human civilians. Your ship contains 8,000 prisoners from 200 different worlds. If you surrender, they all go home safely. If you refuse, we turn you over to them and let them decide your fate." The choice was not really a choice at all. Vextar's surrender was broadcast across the galaxy, carried by communication networks that Jin had spent years infiltrating and now controlled completely. The message was simple. The Galactic Empire was finished, and humanity had replaced it as the dominant power in local space. But the humans had no interest in ruling an empire. Instead, they offered something that the galaxy had never seen before. A voluntary alliance based on mutual benefit rather than conquest and domination. Species that joined the Terran Alliance received protection from external threats, access to human technology, and organizational expertise, and complete internal autonomy. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, dozens of species that had been conquered by the Empire were requesting membership in the new alliance. They brought with them technologies and knowledge that complemented humanity's strengths, creating a civilization that was more advanced and more stable than anything the galaxy had seen before. Mira returned to her research, but now she worked with scientists from dozens of worlds to explore the deepest mysteries of the universe. Her ability to interface with alien computer systems had opened new fields of study that promised to revolutionize galactic civilization. Hana established the Alliance Security Forces, a military organization that combined the best tactics and technologies from hundreds of different species. Under her leadership, the new force became known throughout the galaxy as protectors of the innocent and defenders of freedom. Yuna became the Alliance's chief diplomat, negotiating the complex agreements that bound dozens of different species together in an unprecedented partnership. Her gift for finding common ground between vastly different cultures made her the most respected figure in galactic politics. Their husbands continued to operate in the shadows, but now they worked to protect an alliance that spanned hundreds of star systems. Tai's shadow fleet became the invisible shield that protected alliance worlds from external threats. Jin's intelligence network evolved into a galaxy-spanning organization that prevented conflicts before they could begin.